So I have a few closing comments. This is the die-hard crew right here. This is, ooh. Yes, I can also, do y'all want all three?
That's fine.
Okay. So Atlanta Art Ecosystems has been a series of public dialogues that were about a year in the making. This series of public conversations brought together members of Atlanta's visual art sector. The two-day series focused on Atlanta's small and nonprofit visual art communities' resilience, adaptability, and sustainability. And that's what y'all have been a part of. So thank you. Yes, woo! The Atlanta Art Ecosystems program is built and was built upon the belief that our community already contains the abundance of ideas, innovative projects, and visionary leadership needed to forge a strong and sustainable future for the visual arts. We also acknowledge there are many challenges which, seen from within a community, might appear specific and isolating, but are actually shared by other communities. We opted to invite a house guest to visit, and to close the program by sharing a case study of an ambitious project they've realized, in this case, in New York City. And so, but first, here at the beginning of the ending of this two-day series, I want to echo some of the thank yous that we extended at the very beginning. Thank you to our program partner and host, Atlanta Contemporary, and to their staff, especially Ethan, who is their liaison to their own house guests. Thanks, Ethan. He's somewhere around here fixing something. We knew this would be the ideal venue to host these conversations. And so thank you also to the Art Papers staff for your diligence in bringing this program to fruition and to seeing it through these past 2 days. Thanks to, woo! We're back there. Thanks to the Atlanta Art Ecosystem Steering Committee, some members of which are still here, and for sharing your insight and helping to shape this program into what it became. Thank you to our esteemed panelists, some of whom are still here, for sharing your knowledge and ideas, and to the Art Papers Board of Directors, our volunteers, and of course, again, to you guys. And so we, although we kind of skipped the formal reading of the bios for the local folks and for the panels where there were just so many people, I want to more formally introduce our house guests. That was more flourish. Nothing's about to happen. Fawz Kabra is a curator and writer living in New York. She is director and curator of Brief Histories, a gallery and publishing initiative she co-founded in New York's Lower East Side. Through Brief Histories Press, she produces artist publications. Her writing and interviews appear in Art Papers and other publications. Her writing and interviews, oh, yeah, and there are and a long list of other publications. Far less significant. Kabra has curated exhibitions at the Brooklyn Public Library, at E-Flux Screening Room, at the Center for Curatorial Studies at Bard College, where we also both were in graduate school together. At Brick Arts and Media House, and at the Palestinian Museum in Ramallah. Isak Berbic is a visual artist based, sorry, my hair is in my face. Thank you. Is a visual artist based in New York whose work engages with social histories, representation, and contested narratives. His interdisciplinary projects span photography, film, and installation, often examining the intersections of politics, war, and climate change in relation to contemporary and geologic time. His work has been presented in international exhibitions, including the Havana Biennial, Marrakesh Biennial, Brick Brooklyn Biennial, and Singapore Biennial. Biennale. That one's a biennale. And he has participated in research and residency programs internationally. Berbic is the co-founder with Fawz Kabra of Brief Histories. He is also associate professor of art at Stony Brook University. And last but not least, Berbic is a fourth grader at the Brooklyn Brownstone School in Brooklyn. He practices Taekwondo, has a deep love for Minecraft and anime, like My Hero Academia. He lives in Crown Heights with his parents, Fawz and Isak, and his cat, Balthazar. That's a great cat name. Nur is a core member of Brief Histories, supporting the space with his boundless spirit and curiosity.
Welcome, house guests.
There's one for each of you, but
Yes.
you don't have to.
Okay.
You want to hold your own?
Yeah.
You want to hold your own? Okay. Do you want your own?
Yeah, I'll do it.
Okay.
Thank you so much, Sarah, for bringing us here, and Art Papers for your support. So we'll get started.
Oh, maybe turn it to the first slide. It's the, yeah. All right.
Yeah, go ahead.
I wanted us to start by speaking about Zambak magazine, something which is outside of Brief Histories, but it relates. This magazine was a post-Bosnian War political and cultural publication in Chicago, created in response to the urgent needs of refugee community finding its footing in a new country in 1995. My family and I arrived in Chicago from a refugee camp in Denmark, and I became involved in Zambak. Along with my parents and my brother, as we all, among others, came on aboard and joined the editorial team at Issue 5, transforming it from a nonprofit into an independent publication. At Zambak magazine, my initial task was to receive faxes from Sarajevo, messages arriving from war-torn Yugoslavia and Bosnia, and type them into a computer. Transcribing articles, reports, and letters. In doing so, I unknowingly taught myself to properly read and write in my mother tongue, a language I had never formally studied as a refugee kid. Displaced by war over the course of the following 120 monthly issues, we built something that evolved with its relationship, adapting to the changing needs of the Bosnian community in Chicago. In its early years, Zambak served as a vital informational resource for newly arrived refugees, providing practical guidance on legal protections, employment, housing, and even where to buy a used car. Through purposeful advertisers, but alongside these essentials, it also became a space for unbiased political analysis, cultural critique, and deeply personal reflections on war. Displacement and rebuilding life in the United States. As time passed, so did the urgency of its original mission. The community it once served moved on, securing bank loans, integrating into mainstream media, consumption and no longer relying on a dedicated Bosnian language publication for survival. The news shifted online, and the purpose of the magazine needed to be recognized. After a long process of reflection and transition, we chose to sunset the publication not as a failure, but as a conscious ending to a project that had fulfilled its role. The collaborations, writers, and friends who made Zambak what it was all moved on to a new creative, political, and intellectual pursuits, including, in my case, art making, teaching, and eventually the co-founding of Brief Histories with Fawz, which carries the spirit of self-determination, culture, production.
Thanks, Noor. So at Brief Histories, we began as a siteless curatorial project and have grown into an independent brick-and-mortar art space in New York City, dedicated to exhibitions, public programs, and publications. As a fully independent organization, we do not operate within a grant-based or nonprofit model. Instead, we sustain our programs through a combination of direct patronage, project-based collaborations, and self-generated revenue. This autonomy allows us to remain artist-centered, responsive, and flexible, shaping our programming without external constraints while fostering critical and experimental artistic practice. Our exhibitions, public programs, and publications engage with the urgent questions of our time. Our approach is interdisciplinary, centering artists whose work critically examines history, politics, and cultural narratives. And often, we prioritize experimental, risky, marginalized, and research-driven practices, fostering dialogue between contemporary art, scholarship, and broader social contexts. The first exhibition took place in Sharjah, United Arab Emirates. I will remember to keep clicking as I go. So it took place in Isak's apartment at the time in 2011. And our first publications relied on photocopies, later on risographs and small print runs. But let me tell you a little bit about this show. So at the time, the Arab Spring was erupting in the region. Tunis, Egypt, and later Syria were protesting corrupt power. And on the TV, we watched with our breath held the people in Tahrir Square in Cairo. We wanted to know, what are artists thinking about? What are they working on? What are they doing right in this moment? So it was a house actually, not an apartment, but that's how it goes. You remember that place?
Yes, I do.
That's right.
It was past life.
So this is the first show. We sat in our apartment drafting the premise for the show, then hit send. We invited our friends, artists that we had collaborated with previously, and then we went to a nearby bar, ordered half a roasted chicken and some beers, and waited for the replies to come in. So we recognize that artistic inheritance isn't just about influence. Do you mind if you do this, actually? It's about direct engagement with those who have shaped alternative models of art making and exhibition making. Our first show in Sharjah was a pivotal moment, and among the list of artists who participated were also Ilya and Emilia Kabakov and Brian O'Doherty, whose work was just in that previous slide that says in Arabic, samt, which means silence. In that moment, and in many moments such as now, there's a lot of silence. So gleaning from Ilya's work organizing apartment shows in the Soviet Union, where artists bypassed official institutions by exhibiting in domestic spaces, was especially meaningful to us. His practice demonstrated how art spaces could be self-determined, flexible, and resistant to external control, regimes of power, and these principles helped us shape Brief Histories in its early stages. This influence reinforced our belief in working outside institutional constraints, creating a space that is adaptable, independent, and built on direct engagement with artists and audiences. Just as the Kabakovs navigated and reshaped the limitations of their time, their participation in our first show helped affirm our commitment to building something that operates on its own terms. A space where exhibitions and ideas and conversations unfold in ways that are dynamic, resourceful, and always open to reinvention. We think about inheritance frequently. We inherit lineages of thought, artistic practice, and radical gestures. Our exhibition Inheritance at Brief Histories much later in 2022 explored these ideas, asking where we come from, not just in terms of our DNA, but also of influence, of histories, and artistic legacies. So in this context, oh yeah, you can like really keep going. In this context, Howardina Pindel's participation was profoundly meaningful. As a pioneering contemporary artist and thinker, she, along with the AIR Gallery in New York, which she co-founded, has long been a beacon for critical engagement, equity, and self-determined artistic spaces in the city. Not only does Howardina visit our gallery, but as a participant in the show, she helped us drive the conversation on how artistic and intellectual legacies shape future generations. Her presence within Brief Histories reflects the very ethos of our space, a commitment to learning from those who came before us while forging new paths forward. We don't just admire these legacies from a distance, we engage with them directly, ensuring that our work is both historically rooted and forward-thinking.
Thinking about gaining control of the means of production, like art making and exhibition making in the context of Brief Histories, is an emancipatory act, we believe, because it allows us to operate besides institutional dependencies, ensuring that artistic and intellectual labor is, to the best of our ability, autonomous, self-determined, and directly supported. In this late-stage art world, access to funding, exhibition space, and publishing platforms is often controlled by larger institutions, art fairs, foundations, and market forces that dictate the terms of production and circulation. By hacking into and reclaiming aspects of these structures, curating exhibitions, organizing public programs, and producing publications on our own terms, we try to remove the usual gatekeeping and censorships, enabling artists and thinkers to engage critically with urgent social and political issues without any constraints on their thought. This model resists the common and omnipresent logic of art as a commodity that moves through our financial system and instead fosters an ecology of work where creation is dominant and resources are distributed in service of experimental, radical, and historically engaged practices. It's an act of self-organization, a shifting of power from an institutional way of thinking that often replicates hierarchical and exclusionary systems to a collaboration-led structure that is more agile, responsive, and committed to intellectual and creative freedom. Through this approach, Brief Histories not only supports artists, curators, writers, but also creates an infrastructure for alternative modes of knowledge production and cultural work. For example, bypassing technical obstacles like shipping, crating, importing, taxes, and instead looking at ways where artists can send instructions and work can be produced and reproduced locally. In this way, it reinforces that independence is not just an operational choice, but also a political stand. We take an in-house approach to production, working directly with artists and cultural workers, but also students to create exhibitions, publications, and public programs. This hands-on process is not just about making. It is a rehearsal for lifelong skills where everyone involved engages in material production, problem solving, and collaborative decision-making. Rather than outsourcing labor to services or fabricators, we emphasize collective learning and skill sharing, reinforcing that artistic production is not separate from intellectual and technical labor, but it is an integrated and emancipatory process. Besides, our artists are also fabricators as much as our writers and curators are wordsmiths. This structure also relies on the commitment of artists who work hand in hand with us, resisting the extractive and transactional pressures of the art world. Our model asks artists to be generous with their work and the power they wield as people, understanding that the work they put in, whether it's the creation of the artwork itself, the exhibition installation work, the design or publication making, it's not just in service of their own individual careers, but it also contributes to a broader political and cultural project. In return, they gain something that cannot be bought or brokered, a space for autonomy, solidarity, and the highest quality of artistic freedom. It is through this mutual commitment that we achieve the best results, not only in the work we produce, but in the experience of producing the work together. In turn, artists can also earn income through the direct sale of their artwork, ensuring that financial support flows back to them rather than being absorbed by institutional or large-scale overhead or market-driven intermediaries. To quote-unquote, financial investments galleries do for artists, which are often bundled in funding or paying the way towards big fairs or advertising or shipping, etc., can also act as soft power and become incarceratory mechanisms that are laid on top of artists and cultural workers, especially when they're starting out. Because we operate outside of a traditional commercial gallery structure, we facilitate sales in a way that aligns with our mission, prioritizing sustainability for both the artists and our space while resisting speculative pressures that often dictate the value of art in the market. With the artists in the leading position, we establish pricing that are fair and reflective of common sense. Our approach is rooted in shared commitment and mutual benefit, where income for us and them is earned from sales, and it goes right back into producing the next exhibitions and the next project. This cyclical model reinforces our commitment to an economy of artistic production where artists are not just participants in a system, but active agents shaping how their work circulates, how it is valued, and contributes to the life of Brief Histories itself. It's still me for another 2 pages. I thought I need a drink of water. When you print something, it gives you a measurement. We also experiment with alternative funding models, some more successful than others. For example, to kickstart the Tame the Wilderness publication, we sold ice cream as a street-level fundraising effort. While the sales didn't at all meet our financial goal, we gained something much better and unexpected. We paid for the cooler, which now chills the refreshments at all of our events. Joke aside, This approach reflects our belief that unsuccessful funding attempts contribute to the larger project and to the question of sustainability, and reinforces our resourcefulness. The inspiration for these models comes from observations of other self-sustaining phenomena and systems. We like to think of some examples, funny and not so funny. But one example is the small bodegas or supermarkets attached to mosques in the Middle East. These stores serve both as places where the people who visit the mosque can get their things, but they also upkeep the building and keep the building safe. They also provide a home, usually, for a resident cat that keeps the mice away. It's a nesting doll-like structure, a milpa alta, a term used to describe indigenous farming techniques in Mexico, where interconnected ecosystems ensure long-term sustainability. The corn stalk makes the shade needed for the squash on the ground, and the structure for the beans, and the prickly pear cactus, which stands guard. This way of thinking guides our work at Brief Histories, where every element, even a failed fundraiser or an ice cream cooler, becomes part of a broader ecology of support, resilience, and self-determination. Another unexpected but immediately valuable outcome of our alternative funding efforts was how Icy Cream, the very fresh and crispy title for this fundraiser, became a dynamic meeting point during the initial period of our work to get the space started in New York. It was during Black Lives Matter, the demonstrations, and the COVID-19 pandemic, and while riding in the protests on our bicycles, the three of us selling ice cream in the parks and broadcasting our location every day, we transformed the project into more than just a fundraising effort. It became a site, a mobile site of exchange and meeting with our friends. Our collaborators would find us wherever we were that day, and in these moments, important conversations emerged, problems posited, worries, and reassurances. This discussion is essential for the project to make sense. These meaningful encounters led to real-time feedback on the Tame the Wilderness project, reinforcing the urgency. When the first proofs of the publication were ready, we took the spirit of collective engagement further, meeting for an in-person pencil-in-hand editing session on the sidewalk outside of Signs and Symbols Gallery during the Artists and Allies exhibition on the Lower East Side of Manhattan. In this way, what started as a financial experiment became an organic model for gathering, discussion, and direct collaboration, one that shaped the future of Brief Histories as a space for publishing as well as exhibitions.
So at Brief Histories, working with students is an educational experience for all of us. It's an integral part of how we operate. So from the very beginning, students have played a role in both organizing as well as exhibiting. Our first show in Sharjah included students from the University of Sharjah, who not only helped produce the exhibition, but also presented some of the strongest work in it. This model, where students are not just observers, but active participants, has remained central to our approach. These last couple of years, we have been collaborating with the Center for Curatorial Studies BARD graduate students on the organizing of our public programs. And their involvement expands our network of collaborators, so introducing new critical ideas and perspectives. In return, they gain hands-on experience in shaping real projects with the ability to express, organize, and actualize their ideas with autonomy, something that is often abstracted away in more conventional institutional settings. So we also engage young people as docents during our gallery's public hours. Rather than passively guarding the space, they become active interpreters, unpacking exhibitions for visitors, engaging in conversations, and helping shape the experience of the work. We believe in speaking directly to audiences rejecting the distancing effect of institutional architecture, taking from the impulse of someone like Michael Asher, who removed gallery walls to expose the hidden offices backstage. We never built one in the first place. So our presence, whether it's us or our students, ensures that the gallery remains open, transparent, and in constant dialogue with its visitors. Oh, it's your turn again.
We used to have one. Yeah, like there used to be like a little room in the back, but then we moved it.
That's the bathroom.
That's the bathroom.
No, not the bathroom, not the gallery.
Right.
There was a huge shelf that blocked one part of the gallery, so then some workers removed it, and there was also a door back there, and then they also replaced the door with a wall.
That's true. The projection. In a traditional commercial model, the means of production, whether in art, publishing, or exhibition making, are mostly controlled by powerful companies, institutions, foundations, funders, and market forces that dictate what gets produced, how, and under what conditions. The artist is often placed in the role of the worker, producing value for the entity's gain, or the artwork is forced into the world of commodities, whether for a commercial gallery, a museum exhibition, or an institution. This system extracts creative labor while maintaining control over resources, circulation, and ultimately who gets to speak and on what terms. At Brief Histories, we aim to reverse some of these dynamics by seizing and self-managing the means of cultural production. Instead of submitting to structures that demand legibility or profit, we create our own infrastructure, printing our own publications, fabricating exhibitions in-house, selling work directly, and even improvising alternative economies like icy cream. By doing so, now it sounds successful, right? later on. By doing so, we don't just redistribute resources, we transform the nature of cultural labor itself, turning it into a collective process rather than an extractive one. One of the key reversals in this model is that artists and collaborators become producers of their own conditions. At Brief Histories, production is not something that happens invisibly in the background, performed by underpaid workforce that's at the service of a large company. Instead, it's a shared activity where everyone involved gains something beyond just an exhibition. They gain skills and the ability to build independent structures beyond the constraints of the current art world's economic model. This is why our approach to production, working in-house, involving artists directly, and even including students in fabrication and publishing, is not just a logistical choice, but a political act. It is a rehearsal for self-determination, an assertion that art making and exhibition making do not have to be dependent on systems that demand compromise in exchange for resources and valuation. Of course, this model requires a different kind of commitment from artists, one that runs counter to the expectation that their labor should always be compensated in direct financial terms. Rather than being passive recipients of support, artists working with Brief Histories are asked to invest in the project, contributing time and effort in ways that might be unusual in a more traditional setting. This generosity of labor is not only about our needs and about exploitation, it's about collective ownership of the work at hand. The work that artists put in is not alienated from them. Rather, it directly benefits their own artistic aspirations, allowing them to create under conditions that they can shape themselves. In this sense, Brief Histories is both a site of production and, we believe, a site of liberation making. It is a space where artists resist being suppliers of creative goods for the market. Instead, they become agents in shaping the conditions under which the art is made in the first place. This shift from working for systems to working alongside a system is where the reversal of the means of production unfolds. Some very formal ideas and very clear and technical obstacles that we always keep in mind when we work like this is what the structures that are in place are like and how to interact with them. It doesn't always mean to counter them. The shows are usually focused on solo presentations or curated topics through group exhibitions. We provide shows that stay on long enough for writers to come through and to get their articles published in publications. We use our network to broadcast information in hope of finding support for the artist and in hope of selling their work. All of these are strategies which are reflecting our intention to interact with the state of things as they have congealed to be.
What we are developing at Brief Histories is not just an alternate way of running a space, but a model for thinking about cultural production beyond the dominant institutions of the art world. This is why the ice cream cooler, the handmade publications, and the self-fabricated exhibitions matter. They're not just tools for sustaining the space, they are symbols of a broader vision of artistic autonomy, one where resources are not handed down from above, but created, shared, and sustained by those who use them. In this way, Brief Histories does not just produce art, it produces the conditions for artists to create on their own terms, ensuring that the labor of cultural work remains in the hands of those who generate it. And in doing so, we are not just exhibiting work, we are actively reshaping what it means to produce, sustain, and distribute art in the future. So at Brief Histories, we move walls, literally. Take, for example, our moving wall built in collaboration with the artist Nebojša Serić Shoba. That's the wall. It's no ordinary wall, it is massive to us. And because we believe in maximum functionality, it also stores all of our chairs and various other items. This means that every time we need to set up for a lecture, screening, or a public program, we don't just rearrange a few chairs, we physically shift architecture. One moment, the gallery is a pristine exhibition space. The next, we are pushing, pivoting, and sweating as we transform it into a presentation venue. This absurd yet effective process is not just a physical solution, it is a perfect metaphor for how we make everything happen. Nothing at Brief Histories stays static. We reshape, we adapt, and reinvent as needed, whether it's space, funding models, or the very structure of artistic production. The ability to pivot, sometimes quite literally, defines our ethos. We don't wait for ideal conditions. We engineer them through movement, resourcefulness, and a bit of brute force. And, what ideal conditions are there really when we're starting up with an Arab Spring or making a magazine under COVID-19 and Black Lives Matter and protests and everything else. So yes, at Brief Histories, we move walls, but we also move ideas and expectations and the limits of what an independent art space can be. And if you ever visit, just know that you might be asked to push the walls with us.
Hi, I'm in Haven, Connecticut. I'm Exit Toronto. And I'm in my studio, and I have a show in Brief Histories. There's animals, trees, swords, and the bomb's still in my studio. Maybe we'll have it. And there's a monster hand and a swan that looks like looks like an emoji, and yeah.
And on these days, like Monday and Friday, or rainy days, I just feel so confused. So I make paintings that are like, Earth is squished, and everybody's walking on a square flat earth. Love this emoji swan painting. Made another swan, which is a little bit, I think, is a little bit more like emoji swan. It's like shocked. And there's paintings, lots of them, all in the brain. And this should be called Monster of Death. Could be. We are now going to show you some paintings, like where I make, like, this is going to be awesome, dude. This is going to be awesome.
The end.
So we're good to do some questions and stuff? Oh, yeah. So we have some time to do some questions from the audience if anybody has questions. Maybe this is not the one. Yeah, this is the better one. This is, we've got them tangled. It had to happen eventually, thankfully, here at the end. Okay, wait, I got it. Feet up. We did it. Oh, wait, okay. Wonderful. And now we're back. Okay.
Thanks, guys, so much. I really love all of the. Do I need a microphone?
Well, I mean, if you'd like.
I can take a microphone. Thank you so much. So I just, I really love all of the ideas and the action involved that you covered in your project, and it's really heartening and beautiful and inspiring. I'm interested in understanding kind of, do y'all have a regular kind of periodicity? Like, how often do you change shows, or how often do you do public programming? Is it just entirely fluid, like the walls that you move, or is there a kind of sense of the regularity of that? Thanks.
Thank you for your question. I would say there isn't much of a regularity. We'd really love to have more of a foresight of what's going to happen next. A lot of times we get asked, so what's the next show? And a lot of times it's like, we don't know. And that's really because we're constantly in a precarious situation where we're trying to figure out how to extend the life of this project. And sometimes we go quiet for a few months and we provide the space to others. And other times we have funds. We're lucky to have a show that there were works that were sold, and so we're able to keep going. And then that's where it's like, okay, we know we have this many months. This is what we're going to do. And that's why the artists we work with also we're very transparent with them, and they really know our situation. And so they still want to work with us somehow, and they perhaps maybe even enjoy figuring out how to get us the work, how to make the show, how to build things with us. So whether they're in town, they're at the gallery, whether they're, in the case of Khalil Rabah, who you saw chewing on a shoe, he is in Ramallah in the West Bank, and he's on the phone with us and texting us and sending us pretty much instructions to remake all of his works. And from the 90s. Those were all works from the 90s, and we particularly wanted to show that those pieces this fall. Was it this fall? Sorry, we're in 2024. And so we pretty much fabricated everything, went to New Jersey, got a wardrobe, went to the secondhand store, bought the suit, and built everything for him. So in this way, we were able then to bypass things like shipping things or doing it that way. But it really is off and on. And we have the drive is there, but we also really choose to work in this way. Do you want to say anything?
I think I will just add that the inclusion of the students and the public programming that we've been doing does take into consideration the academic calendar, and that has been another kind of bumpers on the sides in our bowling alley, where we do have a kind of a general idea more than ever before.
You can speak up. Yeah.
So, thank you so much. The passage that you read was extremely well written and thoughtful, as well as everything that you shared. I like the genuineness of it. My question is, you've started this space, this gallery, this concept about 15 years ago, but I'm sure it started long before that. Could you share more about the origin? Because you are reimagining the systems that are in place for decades of what a gallery is and how we engage with artists in that separation and that collaboration. Could you share more about how you meticulously put together this beautiful thing?
I would say a lot of it has come with just facing our realities and experiences and then responding to it. So in the beginning, in 2011, we were once again in this moment where it was totally unstable where we lived and everywhere around us. And we felt very isolated, and we felt that the institutions that we looked to were not necessarily offering anything or responding to it fast enough. Yes, they were, institutions, museums, biennials. They work on things years in advance, right? But when you want to talk about something in that particular moment, it's not necessarily happening. Also, not to forget, there's censorship everywhere. There, here. So instead of, we just didn't want to keep being annoyed about it. We were like, okay, well, what would we do? How could we do this? And it was really because, having a space was the house that he lived in. And having this, these contacts. We worked in the art world. I worked in public programs. He was teaching in an art, college. And we thought, okay, what can we do with what we have? All of these people we've met, all of these people we've worked with before, there must be something. I mean, I think out of everybody that we wrote to, in that first show, there were about 51 artists. one person said, remove me from this mailing list. We're like, it's not a mailing list, it's an invitation to something. But that's fine, well noted. And you know, you realize like this is not, we didn't want that transaction anyways. And so that's how like the show came up. Students in Isak's class were really kind of in it with us. There was, you know, one image with Sada Abu Abdallah with her Saudi automobile back before women were allowed to drive in Saudi, and that was just like the thing that, you know, was on her mind. Now other things, but I'd say it was very much about like, okay, let's just stop talking about this. What can we do about this? And things kind of like get reignited. So we ended up moving to New York out of, you know, different situations. I went to grad school where I met Sarah, Isak, got a job at Stony Brook University and started teaching. So we ended up in New York, and you know, the revolutions, the protests, you know, kept going, and we found ourselves again like in places where like people were like, okay, I have the studio, I have the space, do you want to do something in it? And so we think of something just like on our feet, literally, and with no money. You know, we both have full-time jobs, and we're, you know, but we also understand somewhat this kind of system of like grant giving, and we didn't necessarily want to fall into that or only rely on that. And so it was always like, how else can we do this, you know? And then when it came to making the publication Tame the Wilderness, that was when we thought about it really seriously. We were sitting at home all the time. If we weren't on our bikes at a protest, we were sitting at home and thinking, how can we reach our people? How can we not also feel, again, so isolated? And what can we do on the street that won't get us arrested? And it was like, oh, books, you can have books, you can sell them, you can, you know. So we then figured that out and figured out, oh, but we want the book to have an ISBN, we want you to be able to look it up, we want to have some kind of archive of it. And a lot of that, you know, it started of like our work and self-funding these things because we just believed in it so much, and we believed in the people that were contributing and sharing their essays or their art with us. So I would say, like, yeah, it's in these moments of emergency, and then just like being really patient and finally finding a space in New York, which is really impossible, but after 6 months of just walking around and driving around and calling every for rent sign, someone's like, oh, I think I have something for you. And it was an old office space that had been empty for 2 years with a wall and a tattered carpet. And we, you know, ripped the wall, the curtain and the carpet and the wall, and bolted down plywood. Did some painting and walked down the street and got some lighting from the lighting store, and did it literally with our friends, with artists. Coleman, who just closed a show yesterday at Brief Histories, made us a sign that it's like a sandwich board sign that we put outside. So it's really like people then believe in it and they want to be part of it. And that's how like they kind of also give to it.
Oh, but you know, another thing that's like, yeah, the people, what's his name? He is like owns this Chavapi place. Mm-hmm. I think he like helped us put down the floorboard, the plywood. What's his name?
Veso.
Veso.
Yeah.
Yes. And
Our Balkan connection also.
What is his
Annabelle Basin.
animal basin?
Annabelle Basin, and he grills chivapis and also helped us build the space. Does Bubba want to say something?
I wanted to say something. So, the voiceover on that video was me when I was really young.
That's why it sounds.
Good to know. Thank you.
That's
Yeah.
We won't hold your youthful early work against you.
It was a little bit embarrassing.
You did great. Do we have any more audience questions? Yeah.
What do you want to do in the future?
Me?
For the art world or for your community.
Like, how do you want to help in the art community when you get older?
Or do you? There's no wrong answer on this one.
I think our place has a lot of kids, and he's often there, and it has opened up the gallery to multi-generational visitors, and there's always a hallway where they're doing stuff, and that's a great contribution to taking the seriousness away and bringing something that's really human and vulnerable and making it available, just like we have to travel with our friend, son here, in the same way we are co-sharing that gallery space together.
Yeah. So, did anyone notice the bookshelf in the slideshow? Yeah. So, didn't we give that bookshelf to at your school? Your school. Yeah. Oh, so my school gave the bookshelf to us.
So when we did the show Studies for a Library with Joe Nami, Joe had started this project actually
There. Yeah.
So his school, the Brooklyn Brownstone School, lent us their bookshelf, and we returned it back with the books. The books we collected, they're actually all banned books in the U.S., and they're all banned children's books. So we gave the bookshelf back with books to the school that they took and use. And just a little bit about this show. It's a really beautiful and important show that moved to the Brooklyn Public Library last year. In 2016, Joe Nami's cousin was killed on the front porch by a racist neighbor, and his name is Khalid al-Jabara. And so from there, they had created a foundation, and they one of the school where Khalid's niece was attending, she was 5 years old at the time, they wanted to figure out how to heal the community, how to work through this, and especially work through this with young children, how to, as we know, like hate is taught, right? So how do you, just extend these, normal, what we think is normal ideas of social justice, of love, of care, and learning about these things, the school created this library, the Khalid Jabara Memorial Library, and Joe with librarians continue to build on this, and this was just a small selection from those books, but it was a beautiful show. One of my favorites. I think all of them are my favorite, but one of my favorites.
Wait, go up. So the book that says Nina on it, yeah, I see that book all the time when I'm walking down the hallway to go to the bathroom on the 3rd floor.
At your school, right?
Yes, on the pre-K bookshelf. Oh, and go down one. Down. Down.
Wait, in the other direction.
Can you talk about the megaphone or the?
Yeah.
Yeah, what's the megaphone?
So the megaphone speaker, Joe had worked with a Iraqi opera soprano singer who reinterpreted the sounds of sirens and different kind of sirens, ambulance sirens, police sirens, the emergency like siren in your buildings, and that would go off on the hour in the space. Yeah, it's and then there was also a projection, and it was a short kind of documentary about the library with the principal of the school and so on. Look it up; it's beautiful. Yeah.
Can you?
You want to say something about Haig's show?
Yeah, that's one of my favorite shows. I like it. It's a bit spooky. Yeah. The whole thing is in Arabic, but there are English subtitles.
And this show was about kind of how to deal with grief, and in particular, the artist was actually post the explosion in Beirut port. He was volunteering with his community to clean up, to help people, and they would, at the end of the night, sit on the park bench, thinking like, whoa, what's going on? This city, like, it's full of ghosts. We're surrounded by ghosts. And so this idea then emerged, and he made an animation that's composed out of things that he drew, but also other animations and cartoons, and thinking about ghosts among us. And he created a small stage because a lot of these cartoons also had a lot of like dancing and forgetfulness and kind of thinking about this act of like dance and coming together, not to forget, but to also be together and heal somehow through our energy.
Yeah, I also heard that like the Kabra platform, I think you said that standing on it like makes you charged up or something?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Copper has, the healing.
There's a question way back at the back. I'm corded, so I know we won't reach you. Please just shout loud.
Yeah, for sure. I was wondering if your work or like how you curate spaces and like communal storytelling has involved other art forms like dance or music, or how you go about that. So.
Yeah, we've had a dance performance by Nessa for Nessa. Duo, they're Egyptian. They were visiting actually, and we got to have a dance performance by them. There's also, there will be actually next Saturday a curated performance, curated evening of performances by Fadl Fakhouri, a young Palestinian artist and curator in the city. So that's also something that we work with. I wouldn't say that we have something in mind, like we only show this or that. It's really about the conversations that we have with artists, with people around. And a lot of things kind of also sometimes happen spontaneously. A friend will say, oh, I just, someone's in town, they've done this really amazing project and you should talk to them. And then I'll talk to them and say, okay, well, we don't have any shows happening here for the next 2 weeks. Do you want to do something? And we'll just like pull it up and make it happen before the person leaves, so that our community and others can attend and participate.
I think I'll just add, in relation to art forms that rely and thrive on collaboration, like dance and theater, are very relevant. Partly our inability to host them is more physical, technical in nature with the space that we're dealing with. But certainly those are the kinds of communities that we look to as we create these shows, and also the creation of a magazine is a model that we look at, because magazines respond to things in current time often, and magazines involve many different people with many different roles, and the collaborative aspect of editing something together is something that we translated into exhibition making.
I'm gonna bring the mic because you are a soft speaker.
I am a very soft speaker. Hello. Thank you all for this amazing presentation. I wanted to, kind of going off of your last point, Isak, about sort of looking at publishing as a model, and kind of I'm thinking about the rhythm of working in publishing, how it's a very slow process. And what I really like about Brief Histories is that it is on the one hand very urgent in the way that you respond to things, but it's also, there's this really beautiful slowness in the way that projects seem to come together, and in the kind of thoughtfulness around the way that they're organized. And I'm wondering if you could speak to that slowness and kind of the pacing of your work, which I also think works against or sort of counter to the expected kind of rapidity of more mainstream or traditional artistic spaces.
Yeah, I'll comment on slowness as the space needed to think clearly, carefully, and critically, and as speed as a kind of necessary kickstart. Both of those impulses are somehow present together. When I make pictures, I make photographs as an artist, I often use very cumbersome, slow equipment, like century-old cameras that make large films. And that slow speed of capturing an image allows for criticality to emerge while you're standing with the machine. And I think that is the approach. What maybe starts as the inability to move faster, we have found it to be a productive space that we revel in. Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Oh, thank you. Thanks so much.
And thank all of you so much for being here. And with that, we conclude Atlanta Art Ecosystems. I want to just let those of you who are still here know that all of the videos that have been taken of this program will be edited and provided on YouTube. I'm not going to put a date on that, but we will promote them when they go live. And so if you follow Art Papers on Instagram, or if you get our weekly newsletter email, those are great ways to find out when those things go live. And if nothing else, you can just check in on them to see the work of our wonderful videographer, James Evans. Thank you. And thank you again, Fawz and Isak and Noor, for your wonderful house guest sharing. Yeah, you're good.